Hello, and welcome back to the Hilariously Unemployed podcast. I'm your host and still favorite opportunity seeker, Dana Duckworth, aka the Big Speaker. I am so glad to be back with y'all. This is season 3. Can you believe it? I've been doing this for 3 seasons. I'm still on a mission to help somebody get hired. I know that you all know that my story is one of layoffs turned lemonade. So I'm still on my mission to make sure that I'm supporting those who find themselves hilariously unemployed or want to share their career journey with me. I'm excited to be back with you all. I'm in the mix of like traveling. I'm going to be in Philly on Thursday for Diversitech. Next week, I'll be taking on the Advocate Conference for the National Apartment Association. And it is truly conference season. So I've been speaking a million places, and I'm so excited to be in the midst of travel season. But enough about me. You can catch up with all of my happenings on my socials and on LinkedIn. I'm excited to welcome a guest to the show, you all. This is truly an honor for me to bring him to the show. I had a chance to sing him on the stage at GovTechCon, and I just absolutely loved the energy and knew that it would be something that would be great for my audience. So I'm looking forward to introducing you all to my next guest, Chess Jacobs, who is the head of social impact at Culture Amp. Chess, say hello to the Hilaries.
I the hilarious. I love that. Hi, everybody. It's Chess Jacobs, and I'm the head of social impact at Culture Amp.
Not just the head of social impact at Culture Amp, but a whole vibe. When I saw you on stage, I was like, yeah, he's dropping gems. I love the
You
energy.
know,
I
you
want to be
know,
a person.
you know.
You did your thing and you look good doing it. So I said,
Thank you very much.
come on over here and chitter chatter with me and my folks. Now, this is what we do here on the Hilariously Unemployed. This is the first question for every single guest. Have you ever
Okay.
been hilariously unemployed, Chess?
Hilariously unemployed? No. And I've only
Whoa!
My bad, y'all. My bad, y'all. But I've actually the last three companies that I've worked at have all had layoffs, like mass layoffs that has impacted the entire organization. But I was one of those people whose job had not been terminated either time. So I've been on like the other end of like what goes on in the organization past those kinds of things.
Yes, and we will get into what it's like to be one of the people who survives that many layoffs, right? But
Mhm.
let's take it back to the beginning of your career journey. What was one of your first jobs and what did it teach you about work ethic?
Yeah, so one of my first jobs, like one of my first unofficial jobs, I guess I would say, was that, me and some of my siblings, I have seven siblings, but me and my brothers would like clean homes, we would clean gutters, we would do yard work. And my mom was very, very much so encouraging of us learning how to engage in meaningful and decent work at a very young age, not only because of like the grit that it taught us, but it also like doing work that isn't service oriented, so whether that's from housekeeping to yard work, to working in the service industry as I did when I was in college, you really just you learn skills and you're part of a community of people that know how to really be kind to people. And so for me, um that contributing to my work ethic has taken me very far into my career. And I believe that I wouldn't be the kind of like employee, the kind of contributor to the workforce that I am if I hadn't been doing that kind of work when I was younger.
I love that. You said
Hmm.
kindness is something, and kindness is not something
Hmm.
that often attribute to our skill set when we're talking about career.
Yes.
Let's unpack that a little bit. I feel like
Yeah.
my friends will say, you are kind, you are not nice. And I do feel like I am kind, I am not nice. And kindness has helped me in my career. Like,
Yes.
say I'm a self proclaimed personality hire, but if people like you, you are genuine, you are kind,
Hmm.
and you know what you are doing at that job, it will take you far.
Yes, I agree with that. And also, I don't think of kindness. I'm from Georgia, so a lot of people will say like it's this Southern hospitality way, and I don't think of it as that at all. I see kindness as a way of a mix of being honest and direct while
Mhm,
always being empathic, right? So you
mhm.
never want to be mean, you never want to be rude, but anybody can tell you that I will tell you like it is. I'm gonna like receive the discomfort that comes with that. I'm going to allow you to have the reaction that you need to have, and I will process and we will carry on. And I believe that that is extremely kind. So whether, it's a form of celebration or having a tough conversation or digesting feedback or giving feedback, I just really bring, kindness to the table. And I also don't want people second guessing about what I'm thinking or the way that I'm feeling, especially if it's not going to be like a detriment to the scenario at hand. So yeah, it's taught me a lot.
Yeah, transparency is key. And I knew that we would,
Absolutely.
my friends who say I am kind and not nice, she always quotes Cornell West to me and says, "Love is correction. You love to correct."
Hey, that's hilarious. Now that's hilarious.
Welcome to the show. Tell me, she like, so right now she practices Lent and she's like, well, you should just do it with me. And I'm like, okay, well,
Yeah.
what do you want me to give up? She was like, give up that second thing that you say.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just
Mm-hmm.
say the first one and don't say the second.
And don't say the tag to the thing that you say.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
oh, but that's the razzle dazzle.
That's the seasoning. That's the razzle dazzle.
I know. So I'm working on just saying the first thing and meaning it with my whole heart and being empathetic, but
Mm-hmm.
love is correction. And I just be out here just running my mouth. So y'all bear with me as I practice that for Lent. Thank you so much. So when and where did you land your first corporate gig when you first saw that official paycheck?
Yes. I was working for a property management company in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I was one of those people who had to work all the way through college. So, you know, it was tough being one of the only kids on campus. I went to a Big Ten school where a lot of people had wealthy parents who were contributing and paying for a lot. And, I was flying the entire ship myself. And so, after going to class and doing rehearsals and going to clubs, I was clocking in and I was working with, the corporate crew at the property management company, and I was leasing apartments. I did community management. I kind of like worked my way up within the I guess like the region of the company, and became pretty well known for like marketing and communications in the
Mhm.
property management space. But yeah, I was actually what, all of 18 or 19 when I got my first corporate job. And then that actually helped my career a lot because by the time I graduated from college, here I was, this 21-year-old with 3 years of corporate experience competing against, all of my classmates who had just been doing internships. So, yeah.
That's an amazing story because our connection, we didn't meet in multifamily housing. We met in the
No.
space, right?
Right, right.
Um, but my background, like 14 years of multifamily.
Right, that's true. Yes, yes.
A lot of my audience recognizes that story and they'll hear this and see you and be like, oh, wow, okay. So
Yeah.
Tress was in the thick of it with us too. Do you have any
Absolutely.
funny resident interactions you'd be willing to share with us?
The resident interaction stories. Okay, I feel like we have just entered a deep cut because if you don't work in property management,
You don't
you
know.
don't know. Like you just don't know. You absolutely don't know. And I worked in a building that I also lived in. So
Ooh,
like the resident stories that I would get the
never do
uncut,
that.
unfiltered, learn my lesson, grateful for my time. It taught me a lot about customer service, but won't be doing that again. I don't know if there's like a specific resident story aside from like the standard ones of like people misusing spaces or like doing rentals without actually renting out space or like the squatting and the all of the things, right? So just like the stuff we deal with in property management
No,
land.
I have
But that
dealt with
was
everything. I have
Yeah, I
dealt with
know, exactly,
fire,
exactly.
flood, bed bug, flea,
All of
bird,
the things, all of the things,
hoarders,
all of the things,
toes, mountain.
Yeah, yeah, all of the things. It's the full gamut, falsified,
Oh,
employment statements and
service
you know,
dogs.
just yeah, yeah, like reading dogs out of a fourth floor apartment. What's going on here? Like, like what are we doing? What are we
Is
doing?
this a zoo? Oh, this is not authorized.
This is unauthorized behavior, unauthorized behavior. But also like I'm grateful for my time in property management. Actually taught me a lot about the housing crisis in the
Mhm.
United States and like how important housing is, and kind of like the lengths in which people will go to secure a place to live, which is completely understandable. And so I think it actually sparked like a big conversation about like the cost of housing and like this idea that you can only live in a quality space if
Mhm.
you have somehow become really good at capitalism or have found a job at a company that's led by somebody who's really good at capitalism, right? So it taught me a lot about the back end and like how people are, edged out of
Mhm.
housing and housing discrimination and all that stuff too. So
Y'all hear
yeah,
that? Just spitting, okay? Affordable
for
housing.
sure.
That's something that we'll be talking about because next week I'm going to a National Apartment Association conference at the
Okay,
Hill.
cool.
And affordable housing, it is a crisis. Like one, there's not
Yeah,
enough housing in general. And then two, you have these populations of people who are just coming out of their family homes, people who are entering college or are no longer staying with their family. And then you have seniors also in that population. And then you think about people that are historically marginalized everywhere. And that
absolutely.
absolutely happens in housing. Remember,
Yeah,
Black folks were not even allowed to own houses
yeah.
not too long ago. So when you think about the real estate industry, when you think about property management, know that some of those systemic barriers are still there for folks that look like us.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
All right, Chess. So I want to take a little leap forward. What was the moment that really changed your career? It changed everything for you and let you know that you were on the right path, and that path was going to be one of empathy inside of your employment because social impact, you got to have a heart.
Yeah, sure. Well, after I left the property management space, I started working for a nonprofit organization that focused on essentially democratizing arts education,
Mhm.
regardless of someone's socioeconomic status and their ability to afford it. And it was there where I was very much so getting my leadership chops in being able to work with student populations who were experiencing very much so the same thing I was experiencing. I spent my entire time in college with like very close friends and classmates whose parents were millionaires and had done just like these ridiculous things in life. And, to have an ecosystem where you have like people who come from that background and then people who are on government assistance, right? Working together, trying to learn together, trying to establish a common cultural context. This was the experience of a lot of the students at the nonprofit that I was working at. So, like, not only am I like administering and leading education programming, but like these are just casual coffee table conversations that I'm like having to facilitate and help these students like unpack what these feelings and emotions are in the context of trying to create stories with each other.
Mhm.
And so I think like that, and then that carried into the moment or the career move that I would say helped shift things was my first job at this organization called Niantic, which is most known for creating Pokemon Go.
Mm.
And the moment where, my career, I would say, took a leap and changed everything was meeting my boss there, whose name is Trinidad Hermida. And she was perhaps like the best manager to have at the transition in which I was, just going from property management to the nonprofit space and now into the tech space
Mhm.
because she taught me the cheat codes. She
Mhm.
taught me everything that I needed to know about how to be successful in an organization within maybe 30 days.
Wow.
And her rigor, the feet to the fire that I was under for the first 3 months of being in that organization. I mean, sweating, typing away back to backs, the whole thing. But she didn't let me give myself any excuses. She refused to let me fail. And I think when you have leaders and you have collaborators who refuse to let you fail, the world is your oyster. So I kind of try and model, my management style and my leap towards, the next steps in my career every time I take one
Mhm.
with that kind of ethos that she gave me in mind.
Wow, you gave me a lot there. One, I was a Pokemon goer, y'all. I was hardcore.
Hey,
Um, two, talking about the people that are in your path as you are developing your career. People can really make or break your journey in some ways. So that's why I feel it's so important that if you are connected to people and you come across their path, whether that is in leadership or you are working peer to peer with them, you have impact on their experience and what their trajectory could be. This person saw you and said, "You are not going to fail. I'm going to teach you everything you need to know." And a lot of times we need that. A lot of times for Black and Brown folks, we don't have access to executive presence. We don't
yes,
have access to some of the things that we need in order to really see some of those higher levels of success in our career. So having someone who shows interest in you directly as soon as you get in the organization, do not take that for granted, man. Soak up
um,
everything that that person is offering you. Do you all still have a close relationship now?
yes, yes. And
Still holding those
actually,
feet to the fire, huh?
well, oh, definitely. And actually, one of the people that I ended up managing when I went to my next job, I connected those two people together, and they are
Mhm.
like this now. I mean, they have a podcast together themselves. Like they are like, so tapped in. So it's just great to like, continually build that ecosystem.
Yeah, I can't say it enough. People are a professional asset, man. Find your folks. Really find your
Mm-hmm,
folks. They can help you
hmm.
leverage. So you've been in really tough positions. I know you said that you have never been hilariously unemployed, and we booed you here because that's what we do. But
Boo, boo, boo.
boo to your employment.
Tomato, tomato, tomato.
Only place where we boo people for having a job. I know. So, as a person who has gone through these major shifts where you've seen layoffs coming or you've been the one helping to implement them, what really goes through your mind when you have to make those decisions and how do you approach them with care? Because for us who have been on the shop block, it feels very.
Yeah, yeah. You know, what I'll say is I am still figuring that part
Mhm.
because I can't confirm whether or not um, it's like personal or impersonal.
Mhm.
And I think that's not the HR answer
Yeah.
that, you're coached to give,
Mhm.
right? Um, But I think, a lot of times, we run with this whole business is just business thing, but there are humans who run businesses. So
Yeah.
there's human decisions and human thoughts being made and human behavior that's influencing these decisions. And I've heard, like stories from other friends who are in organizations that are either HR executives or just like people managers. They could be a people manager in the product space who have like created some kind of like makeshift role for a person because they really want to keep them around. So when stuff that like that happens, it's like, okay, like is it really impersonal? Like is there no personal influence in this? And I think that's just a different, it's different for every organization, it's different for every team of leaders and what they're navigating as they're like making those tough decisions. What's going through my mind all of the time is how did we get here?
Yeah.
you know, because the decision of like who's getting laid off or like when we're doing layoffs or anything like that, like while that is like gonna be the domino that like impacts a bunch of people's lives on the back end of it, I always feel like there's not enough focus on the people who are responsible for putting us in this position. And that's my personal take, right?
Mhm.
That's my personal take.
Mhm.
Um, and so that's really what's on my mind, if I can be honest. Like when we get to like the transactional part of like doing like headcount management and like thinking about who's gonna be or like what's the trade-off, or do I want to lay myself off at this point? Like, do I want to be at this company? I don't know. Like you get to all of those things. Like those things happen.
I
And
didn't even know
so
that was a conversation or a situation.
yeah, and this is not. I'm not saying like this is a me thing. This is just like I have a bunch of friends in the HR space, who at several points, have been told like, "Hey, your team needs to be reduced," and they're like, "Okay, great, I'll be the reduction." Yeah,
Wow.
like I'll
Yeah.
go, like it's like, and that sometimes that's why I'm saying, like it's very hard to like pinpoint specifically what it is about every organization because every organization and every leader and every people manager makes those decisions, differently. And I'm not, speaking on behalf of my employer when I say this. This is really just looking at the landscape and from what I understand about layoffs and having been internally on organizations, both at a junior end in my career and now,
Mhm.
how things just kind of like play out. In terms of approaching them with care, I mean, if we're having an honest conversation, how do you lay somebody off in a caring way, right? Like
Mhm.
obviously, I feel like one of the things that I feel is perhaps troublesome about the way in which we talk about this idea of care is really we're just talking about not being an asshole. And I just feel like there are way too many people who are assholes in the
Mhm.
corporate sector so that
Mhm.
when people is just being a simply decent human being, it's seen as being caring.
Right.
It's
Mhm.
seen as being empathic. It's like this whole, oh my gosh, these people are so nice. And it's like, no, this is how humans are supposed to behave. This is how we're supposed to engage, regardless of whether we're at work or out in public.
Right.
But we have been skewed towards this like frame of mind that we need to like be approaching, like, so I think that's another part of it too. So how do I approach it with human decency? I think is the way in which I'll answer the question,
Mhm.
is that you want to be able to give people, as big of a runway as you can if the company has the money to do so, which most companies do.
Mhm.
Um, I think you need to be pretty objective about, the situation, or as objective as you can be. Sometimes it's subjective, sometimes it's objective. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's just different for every organization and kind of like what's going through my mind or somebody else's mind. Like it's gonna vary because companies get there to a different point. It's different scenarios. So like let's just say there's a layoff happening and somebody has been at the company for 6 years and somebody has been there for 3 months. Like the way you
Yeah.
approach those things is just gonna be so different.
Mhm.
It's gonna be so different. And if you've looked at, I don't know if you know about this website, but there's this website called layoffs.fyi. And
Mhm.
on there, you can pretty much see a tracker of like how, what companies are doing layoffs, like how many people, all these different kinds of things. And just like I think about those numbers. And when I look at them, like I'm just not thinking about, oh, this company laid off, 300 people. I'm like, these are 300 different stories that have just
Yeah.
unfolded in a
Mhm.
day's notice, or 2 days notice or where. So it just varies so much, and like I just try to kind of like lead with that and knowing that like if I ever got a phone call saying that my employment was being ripped from under me, I try to engage, even like let's just say if I'm not the person who's doing a layoff, like just knowing that that is happening in the ecosystem around me.
Mhm.
Try to engage with people in an empathic way.
I like what you said. There is a different standard. Like human decency is the standard when because we're seeing things where it's like you put 100 people on a Zoom call and you tell them all at once and then you cut off all of their access, or you're sending it to them in an email saying it was because of performance when we all know that's not the case. So we've seen these instances of people being really bad at the way they transition people outside of their org. So now when people are like, yes, you can have severance. Yes, I'm going to have a one-on-one conversation with you. Yes, you can keep your laptop. We're like, oh, wow, they really do care.
Right,
And
exactly, and that's just how it should be done.
yeah,
Like that's just how it should be done. So
yeah, we got to change the tone
yeah.
and set the standard. I love that you said that it's not really about care, it's about decency. Like the same way you
Mhm.
people into your organization and you make all of these promises and you want to have that great onboarding experience when they exit. Although it's not a great experience for them, you should still try to make it one of empathy and do whatever it is that you can to help them land a little softer.
Mhm.
So, talk to me about this idea of being the person who is left behind on the layoff. So, you've seen a number of cycles. Do you have any emotions or mixed emotions about your experience when these things happen and you're still there at the organization?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I mean my experience might not be common, but I'm always thinking, the people who have been impacted, like for a long while, I'm like checking LinkedIn, seeing if they got jobs. Like if I hear of anything, like I'm sending stuff all the time. And there's a mix of emotion because it's like while you're grateful for remaining employed, you're just like dealing with the impact of that moment. And then also when we come down to like the productivity sense of it all, if somebody on your team has been impacted, you're kind of like either you're typically absorbing work if the company
Mhm.
is not deciding to like shut down a downstream. So then typically after layoffs, like I have a friend who's been at a company who has done like 4 layoffs over the past however many years. And it's like they have survived every time. And it's like their workload just increases, increases, increases. And then the company comes back around to realizing that they actually need the additional resource. So then, like, so it's like it's dealing with like stuff like that of like trying to like wade through the pressure of just kind of like the moment, but then you're also like extremely grateful, especially in this economy and in this environment, to remain employed, right?
Yeah.
So it's like that balance. And then you have the anxiety of even though you may have quote unquote survived a
Mhm.
layoff, you have the anxiety of it eventually happening again, that you just kind of like don't know when or how or
Mhm.
in what way it's going to be you're going to be impacted in the future.
Mhm.
So it's a mix of things. It's like, how are you both gratitude and grateful and anxious, or like how are you like annoyed and also excited? Like it's just a mix of things. And so my experience has been having to navigate feeling all of that at
Mhm.
the same time.
Okay, so let's talk about you being a young leader and really what that looked like for you, because working your way up in property management while also holding down a college career is no easy feat. So you are
Mhm.
automatically like thrust into a leadership position. As soon as you start working in property management, you are a leader because you are responsible for people's most expensive.
Well,
They
yeah.
will remind you every,
Yeah.
every single time something is wrong, they will remind you how much they pay you. Not you, how much they pay for their rent. So
Yes, yes.
kind of are thrust into a leadership role there. What has it been like, and how do you handle the responsibility of being such a young leader? And what did you learn about your leadership style as you went from industry to industry?
Yeah, I think for me, being a young leader, I learned a lot about like facilitation. I learned a lot about like connection building and
Mhm.
really this idea of like servant leadership. So for me, and I work with, I advise leaders now. Like I have 2 or 3 leaders that are C-suite executives in the tech industry who I advise, and I kind of like give them my perspective, even still being like a much more younger leader in the space. Kind of like speak to them about like what's happening on the ground level of the business, right? Somewhere in the ground level of the job market. And I firmly believe that like while C-suite executives are like super responsible for everything that happens at a company high level, I feel like a lot of the leaders that I've seen be the most successful are as close to the ground level as possible. These are people who are super accessible, who know their frontline workers, who know their frontline customers, who know their small business customers, and kind of like have like a broad knowledge of their entire ecosystem. And so that I think was how I handled my responsibility the best. Like I would think about like what do my top level leaders need to know from me? But then the vast majority of my personal stakeholders are actually the people who are, the people who have to live with 4 other roommates in their apartment,
Mhm.
not the person who can afford the 4 bedroom on their own.
Mhm.
Like like it's like those, that's kind of like how I like to think. And so for me, about my leadership style, that translates to me being a very communicative leader.
Mhm.
That translates to me being a super supporter. I'm not the kind of leader who just gives back, and like is all strategy. Like I'm willing to jump in there and do the work. I'm willing to build the deck. I'm willing to write the copy. I'm willing to like collaborate. That's just kind of like how I roll. And I think that's why my quick advancement into leadership is kind of funny to me.
Mhm.
Um, because the more I get pulled into like strategic meetings and high level meetings and X, Y, and Z, the more I really, really want to continue to do my work. So I kind of like thrive in those roles where it's like I get to do my project development stuff, but I also get to do the strategic oversight. And I think those kinds of leaders are the leaders that I admire. They're the leaders that I like. They're the leaders that I enjoy. So yeah, yeah,
I love that so much. Those are the types of leaders that I enjoy. And I think, I mean, we're just like people person. You got to get in there
yes.
with people because
Well,
the
I think
people.
it's like I think a big part of it is like somebody said to me one day, coaches don't always play the game. And I'm like, yeah, but if I ever had a coach who decided to get in the game with me,
Yeah, imagine what we could do.
like that's what I'm saying. So like sometimes you just like to see your leaders do what they do best. Um,
Mhm.
and I think I think that's what, I think that's the kind of leader that I want to be,
Mhm.
and that I like to be.
So let's talk about how young you were when you started moving into maybe more senior levels and what that looked like. I know you quoted something to me that I was like, that makes all the sense in the world. When you are a young person, I'll let you say it to the audience. But tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, yeah. Um, so, I mean, when I got to what I would consider like to be like high level leadership, to be all of 25.
Wow.
Yeah, I had to be all of 25, and I was a manager of managers at 25. So, I think for me, being in that role really showed me that my greatness was other people's problem. Um, and not in a sense that like, oh, chess is here shaking everything up,
Mhm.
that it's I mean, I guess that's what I did do, right? But I think I think my experience of that, becoming a leader at that age, really shifted the way that people around me saw their own career and their own trajectory, right?
Mhm.
Because we get into this habit of like understanding that we have years of experience behind us, and that it's the years of experience behind us that got us to the place in which we are today,
Mhm.
which is true. However, we cannot use our own careers as measuring sticks against someone else's,
Correct.
right?
Uh-huh.
That's just something that we can't do. So it felt, reflectingly, I could see very clearly that my advancement at such a quick moment at such a young age felt like a massive threat, and kind of a, you don't deserve to be here. How did you get here? X, Y, and Z. Um, and, I so appreciate the commentary. However, again, one thing about chess was not the DEI hire here.
Right. Okay.
Let's
Only
be real.
qualified.
Let's be real clear about that. Let's be real clear. With less experience, chess is doing more and better work. So I don't know. I don't. I really appreciate the eyeballs on me. I really do. However, let's shift the concern.
Mhm.
Let's shift the concern and start having a conversation about, why do people feel threatened about young leaders and
Mhm.
about young Black leaders specifically,
Mhm.
in spaces in which, we are not by any margin, the large swath of the representation. And
Mhm.
so when I say kind of like my greatness became other people's problem, it's because I had like the young energy of like being a 25-year-old who was working from home, and like being able to like respond to emails on a dime and get decks out there and type super
Mhm.
fast and design my own things and speak very eloquently and quickly and do all the X, Y, and Z. I
Mhm.
think just like my ability to deliver ultimately raised the bar
Mhm.
for everyone around me. And then it became every time I come to a team meeting, I'm prepared. My one-on-ones are action. I think, the items are done. And I don't know what else to tell you. I don't know what else to tell you. I don't know what else to tell you. Like, but instead of being rude, instead of being condescending, instead of making backhanded comments, you could ask for my help.
Woo!
You could,
You
however,
could.
comma. But I guess I heard very brilliantly, another leader named Libra Clemens,
Mhm.
I believe her name is, say that, to do the work that I do in this social impact DEI space, you have to be a corporate athlete. And I think for me, I took that to heart and I ran with it. And it's true. I do my conditioning, I do my work, I listen, I talk to leaders, I engage when I get into organizations, I do my world tour. And I also try to be as kind and as empathic as possible. I'll go back to what I was saying earlier in the call. And I was working in property management, and there was a tenant who was literally breeding dogs out of their apartment. And that was, like, I mean, it's, I have been called a tree hugger by my friends, like I have, all the things. So my opinions on like breeding and adoption, in the animal space, it's its own thing. However, what I will say is like if somebody is doing something because that is their means of getting an income, and like me being the person in the position of power to like
Mhm.
shift that, like that's a part that's kind of like what I'm saying, where you have to have kindness and empathy. Like, you do have to, like, in that situation as a young leader, saying like, hey, these are the terms of the lease, these are things you can and cannot do.
Mhm.
However, if you are going to end up being homeless as a result of you not being able to do what you are doing right now, how can that help you find like employment? Like, what do you need? Like, these are the kinds of questions that you ask, right? Like, I just get so frustrated when people stop at like their first reaction to a thing, because they're in a position of power or in a position of authority. Like, if somebody is engaging in something or not performing, we'll bring it back to work, not performing in a way in which you prefer, why are we defaulting to terminations
Mhm.
and performance improvement plans and X, Y, and Z when we could be defaulting to coaching and internal
Yeah.
mobility? And like there's so many other options. So I think that's just kind of that's how it's influenced the way that I lead, bringing that, being a young leader into kind of like dealing with other people's reactions to my greatness, and like all of that is just in my head, and influences the way in which I see the world and engage in my work.
So as we go from this lovely quote of your greatness is other people's problem, I love that. And if you hear me saying it, I will copy you. I got it from Chess, y'all. It's your problem.
Period, period, period.
But let's elaborate on some of the things that you picked up in your early career, like working in the nonprofit space. And I know you shared with me that like you have no ego in your work when it comes to like
Yeah, yeah, I mean, because at the end of the day we pay bills on a floating rock, so I kind of don't really understand,
this.
like I don't really, I just feel like ego through work is such a cop out for me.
Mhm.
For me, I'm not writing the curriculum for anybody else, but I feel like the way in which we're able to gain wealth, the way in which we're able to acquire work, like the hands we're dealt when we are born into this world, they just vary so much. And so to derive my ego from a position when I'm somebody who canonically works hard, right? Like I'm
Mhm.
somebody who does that. Um, but to derive my ego from it as a place in which I'm proclaiming my human existence on it and my self-worth on it, I just think it's such a bad recipe for decision making and your outlook on your career and your outlook on something that you'll be doing for a long time.
Mhm.
And so, for me, I feel like because I've done all of the jobs, worked in property management, been a bartender, cleaned yards, worked in DEI, did my six-figure jump, all of the things. Like, I feel like because I've done all of that, when you have that kind of like diverse experience of work, you start to realize that having an ego in it like ultimately does nothing. What you do need to have is self-awareness, right? What you do need to have is like strategy. What you do need to have is grit. You need to have all of those things. But having ego in my work, particularly as a social impact leader, does nothing for anybody ultimately.
Mhm. So, in talking about your career and the many different roles that you've held, it may seem to some like, okay, he's always been a person of service, so it makes sense how
Mhm.
he ended up here in his career. But what were some challenges or failures along the way that really shaped you most into who you are today?
I mean, the whole career is a challenge,
Mhm.
right? Because I am regularly either engaging in service to sort of correct the wrongdoing of a thing or aid the need of a thing
Yeah.
or compel other people to be active on a thing, right? So the whole thing is a challenge. I feel like my whole career has been a challenge because whether it's like geopolitical pressures or philosophical differences or anything that's just like an external pressure, you are in this work every day trying to figure out how to do the most good you can in the world.
Yeah.
Right? In an ideal world, I wouldn't have to have my job. There wouldn't be a need for altruists. There wouldn't be a need for philanthropists. There wouldn't be a need for people who are trying to give back to society. Because if people just gave to society and didn't hoard, then we wouldn't be here,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so for me, I think like it's been the challenge has been continuing to do it, even and continuing to do it knowing that there is kind of like this ever-ending um, cycle of people who are opposing progress, like that is the challenge. Because I think for a lot of people who have either left the DEI space or left the social impact space or what have you, a lot of us, just get tired of position. We get tired of having to like play Tetris and play mind games and,
Mm-hmm.
corporatize things that are just like very, very, very simple facts about, society. And so for me, that has felt like a challenge in terms of like the straight climb of it all. I think like industry wise, it's been kind of like this, like this, like this. But I have been in this service oriented thing for a while, as you've said, and that comes from parents. My parents are both like service oriented people. They met at a civil rights. So that's kind of how that works.
Love
But
story.
yeah, oh, what a love story! What a love story! I will tell you about it someday.
Yes, please, please. Over drinks or coffee.
Yes, yes.
Okay, Chess. This has been absolutely amazing for me to hear from you. And speaking about like social impact and DEI and just the weight of that. For me as a DEI consultant, I was a practitioner inside of an organization. Um, Burnout is like something that we're highly susceptible to because as you said, we're always trying to convince or convey or plead or show our case, and it's just like these are the facts, just get on board with me. But that is not the way of our world, so I love you bringing that up. Now, and speaking about philanthropy and social impact, what do you think companies often get wrong about social impact, and what's a better way that they can start approaching it to make our lives a little bit easier?
Two things. There's this book called, I believe, Decolonizing Wealth. And
Hmm.
I also believe the author's name is Edgar Villanueva, I believe.
Okay.
And this book is really an important read for anybody who is in the philanthropy or social impact sector, just in terms of like wrapping our brains around the genesis of philanthropy and the etymology of a lot of the language that we use in this space, and how to consider or what to consider about the world and engaging in it. And I think if more people started engaging in philanthropy from that perspective, we would be in a different space. I will say one of the things that I do when I talk, and now talking, about my work at Culture Amp,
Hmm.
one of the things that I always speak about with nonprofits is that when we're engaging with them for the first time, I always ask them what is their ideal version of this relationship. And I think a lot of times, when we, as either corporate philanthropists or people who are in a position to help someone, we kind of like want to do the thing that we want to do.
Yeah.
And we want to show up the way we want to show up without taking into account what the actual needs of the individual or the organization are. And so I like to approach philanthropy from a beneficiary first mindset.
Hmm.
And just like come to their table as they ask me to come to their table or as they allow me to come to their table, and finding out like kind of like what they're about, what their mission is, what their goals are, and then what is the ideal version of our relationship, um as like corporate to nonprofit. And so I think if you just like start from those two things, like this principle of decolonizing wealth, and then from this beneficiary first mindset, we could correct a lot of wrongs in the philanthropy and the social impact space.
Mm. You heard it from Chess, folks. Okay. We can correct a lot of our wrongs if we start that way. Chess, I want to give you the opportunity to leave any lasting words, share any projects, products, or ways that our audience can follow and support your journey.
Yes, I'm just Chess Jacobs everywhere, LinkedIn, Instagram, Blue Sky. So if anybody wants to connect with me, please, just like reach out. Upcoming projects, none really. Really loving my work at Culture Amp, and we're keeping the philanthropy thing going. And so, yeah, just like thanks for having me on the show.
Oh, thank you. It has been my pleasure. I knew it was going to be a vibe. Hilarious. I want to thank you for tapping in with me for the first episode of season 3. I am so excited for this journey. If you or anyone you love has been impacted by layoffs and needs a platform like mine to highlight your skill sets in hopes of finding your next role, please be sure to reach out to me. I am heavily booking for season 3. I've been your host and always your favorite opportunity seeker, Dana Duckworth, aka the Big Speaker. I'll see you next time. Bye.